Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. Happy Monday. It is July 8th. I am just back from vacation and it is great to be back with you, needless to say. Had a great vacation, some beach time with the family, and I would say rest and relaxation, and there was some of that. And yet, wow, there were some major political earthquakes happening. Number one, France. Number two, Great Britain. Number three, Iran. And number four, the fallout from the debate in the United States between Joe Biden and Donald Trump on June 27th. We're still feeling the fallout right now. And who knows what this week will bring when it comes to Biden and his future at the top of that Democrat ticket in November. So, as I said, a good vacation, but man, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't kind of checking and following closely what's going on, folks, for such a time as this, right? Because look, the Middle East, for one, never sleeps. Even if Stakelbeck goes on vacation, the Middle East continues. Prophetic events continue to unfold in the world's most volatile and chaotic and pivotal region. That's number one. Number two, hey, Europe, France and Britain, folks, have taken a hard left turn. And I saw some people on Twitter and on social media saying, well, who cares? America first, and it doesn't matter what happens in France, Britain, Israel, Iran. I don't care what happens. All I care about is America. Look, I get it. I'm America first too, no doubt. But you can't be America first at the expense of caring at all about what happens in the rest of the world. That's just not realistic, folks. Everything's interconnected today, for better or for worse. That's number one. But number two, events happening over there, if you're an American like me, profoundly affect us right here. Not only in America, it affects the entire world. And you can't watch Britain and France, which again, I know we have viewers from around the world, but just a brief second here to speak from an American perspective on it. Britain and France, both nuclear powers, both NATO member nations, both sit on the UN Security Council, and both, look, we're traditional standard bearers of Western civilization, two nations at the forefront of Western civilization. When they go radical hard left, that's a big deal, a very big deal for America, for Israel, for Europe, for the free world in general. So, yeah, we need to care about what happens over there. And what happened in Britain and France was profoundly troubling if you're someone who, like me, stands for faith, family, and freedom, for traditional biblical values, for Judeo-Christian Western civilization. What we just saw in Britain and France flew in the face of that. And what we see is an alliance, a strange alliance in some respects, but a very real alliance between radical Islamists and the radical left, who are now flexing their muscles at the ballots and in elections. And you would say on its face, the radical left and radical Islamists, they have nothing in common, barely anything in common, right? But what they do have in common is a shared loathing for Judeo-Christian Western civilization and biblical values. Both radical Islamists and the radical left want to tear apart the foundations that the West was built upon, which are biblical foundations. That's undeniable. So these strange bedfellows have that in common, and they're working together increasingly. Look no further than college campuses here in the United States, where I'm sitting right now. So we want to talk about that a little bit, but one election we're going to start with today. We're talking elections, right? Britain, France, United States in November, the implications there, and Western elections. What about Iran? Iran held an election over the weekend. A new Iranian president was chosen, voted freely by the people or not. Folks, listen. Two things to know about any presidential election in Iran, and that's what we saw over the weekend. Number one, any Iranian president, you can have the dog and pony show, the charade of elections. Any winner in the Iranian presidential elections is hand-picked by the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. If Khamenei doesn't want you in that slot, you are not getting in that slot as Iran's president. Remember, the supreme leader of Iran is exactly what his name says. He's the supreme leader. He rules over the nation with an iron fist. He's a political, theological figure at the helm. Now, he's not supposed to be political per se, but he's profoundly involved. Every major decision in Iran goes through the supreme leader. The president answers to him. The Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps answer to Khamenei. What he says goes. So the Iranian president is essentially a figurehead. He is in charge of the day-to-day political, I don't want to say decisions, because again, the supreme leader makes decisions, but the day-to-day political game, let's say that. Another key role for Iran's president. He's kind of the regime's face to the world in some respects. He's the one who will meet with world leaders 9 times out of 10. Khamenei's not traveling. He's 85. There's been rumors for years that he has cancer. Now, he might have people like Vladimir Putin come to him and pay their respects in Tehran, but he's not getting on a plane and traveling. That is the Iranian president. This is the guy who will give the speech before the UN General Assembly in September. So figurehead, kind of the regime's face to the world. His name, by the way, is Masoud Pezeshkian. Say that fast 3 times. Masoud Pezeshkian. And look, folks, when I said there's 2 things to know about any Iranian presidential election, I gave you number 1, that the supreme leader handpicks the winner, quote unquote. But number 2, if the mainstream media is hailing the winner, hailing the victor as a moderate, as a reformist, then you can bet your bottom dollar that he is anything but. And Masoud Pezeshkian, I'm going to have to get used to saying that name, I have a feeling. Yeah, he kind of keeps, not kind of, he does keep to the same old radical standard of every one of his predecessors, including, of course, the butcher of Tehran, Ibrahim Raisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash back in May alongside Iran's foreign minister. You know, there's a great song by The Who, Won't Get Fooled Again. One of the closing lines was, "Meet the new boss, same as the old boss." You get a pretty good idea when you're looking at Iran and the presidential landscape of what The Who was talking about. Let's just say that. Hey, before we get into Masoud Pezeshkian, more about him and what he is saying about Israel and to Hezbollah. Now, folks, look, if he's the great moderate reformist, then maybe he'd strike a more conciliatory tone towards Israel, towards the West. A true moderate, a true so-called reformer would have to abandon Iran's terror proxies, right? How can you call someone a moderate and a reformer when they still desire the destruction of Israel and wholeheartedly support the likes of Hezbollah? Well, I want to quote Pezeshkian directly, number 1. Number 2, we got to talk a bit about France and Britain. I mean, folks, this cannot be understated. Let me put it this way. There is a great shadow descending upon the Western world. And it's interesting because a month ago here in the newscast, we talked about Europe, Western Europe in particular, taking a turn to the right. Election results in Italy, in Germany, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in the European parliamentary election a few weeks ago, elections, plural, I should say, in all these EU countries, strongly favored the right. It was a political earthquake from what everyone was saying. And in France, the right wing, led by Marine Le Pen, were strongly favored to win in France and win the parliament in France, really by a landslide, it was expected. Folks, the direct opposite happened in France. a motley coalition of communists, socialists, environmentalists, the Greens. They won. They captured the most seats in France's parliament. And in Britain, the Labour Party, left-wing Labour Party, won a resounding victory on July 4th. So we have to talk about that because it has profound implications. I said a great shadow descending upon the Western world. Britain and France, along with Germany, probably the three most influential nations in Europe, in Western Europe. Britain and France, from an American perspective, America's closest allies in Europe. Among America's arguably top 5 allies in the world, Britain and France. Although the United States, particularly with France, doesn't always see eye to eye. Nonetheless, it's been an alliance for decades upon decades, the better part of a century. So it matters. So we want to talk about that as well. But before we get into it, hey, if you like what you're hearing, if you like current events and news, and hey, there's a lot going on. And we'll talk about here in the United States as well with what is going on here. Joe Biden, what does November hold in the U.S.? Uncharted territory, unprecedented times. I don't say that lightly. Uncharted waters we're sailing into, stormy waters. And if you're not holding on to the Lord during this time, it's going to be rough. But we'll talk about all of this. And if you like what you're hearing, hey, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Folks, we are fast approaching 1 million subscribers here on the channel. We're almost at 949,000. Hard to believe for such a time as this, and not for our glory or our edification. We ask you to subscribe and give us a thumbs up so that more people can see these videos. Folks, that's all we care about. We're not doing this, as they say, I'm not doing it for my health. I'm doing it because I feel called to do this. We all are at our team. Again, for such a time as this, prophetic times, Bible times, this is what God has called us to do. So if you want to be a watchman, watchwoman on the wall with us every single day, be sure to subscribe. You can also become a member. Just click join to become a premium member here on the channel. You'll get the Stakelbeck podcast every week. We do exclusive premium member live streams, some really good stuff for our premium members. And look, if you're not a premium member, that's okay. We love having you here either way. But please make sure to subscribe so we can get this message of truth, biblical truth out in times where good is called evil and evil is called good. That's the days we live in right now. And someone's asking in our chat, which platform shall we subscribe? Right here on YouTube, just click subscribe. And there you go. We have very active chat here that I'm looking at, scrolling down the side of my laptop. Okay, let's get into Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. Again, I'm going to have to get acclimated to using that name frequently, I have a feeling. Here it is from the UK Telegraph. I'm just looking down, reading this straight off my phone. I do not want to misquote. And folks, you got to love the way it starts. Iran's new moderate president. I mean, the mainstream media has just swallowed the Kool-Aid. They desperately want some great moderate Iranian reformer to take the helm. And let me just say, we've seen this script before. Mohammad Khatami was Iran's president, I think from 1999 to 2005. They hailed him as a reformer, a moderate. And then Hassan Rouhani was at the helm from 2013 to 2021, a moderate, a reformer. Khatami and Rouhani, they're both clerics. They were, Ayatollahs, imams. They smiled for the cameras. They usually cloaked their more radical beliefs in more pleasing sounding language. They knew how to play the game. Now, sandwiched in between them were Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, a notorious radical from 2005 to 2012, roughly 2013, and Ibrahim Raisi, the butcher of Tehran, from 2021, August, until his demise in May 2024. So they're going back and forth. A so-called moderate reformer followed by a hardcore fire-breathing radical. Now, why would Iran do this? Again, it's all up to the supreme leader. When the supreme leader wants to present a certain face to the world, that will be reflected in the Iranian president, meaning this time around, and folks, I think this is telling, Masoud Pezeshkian, the moderate reformer, that's everyone's calling him moderate reformer. The mainstream media got the memo. Why would Iran put someone like that out front as the face of the regime right now? I think this is pretty telling because Iran is sprinting to the finish line in its nuclear program. Now, if they have a fire-breathing radical at the helm, then maybe there's more scrutiny on the regime. If they have a moderate reformer who's pretty much a no-name with not much of a history, Masoud Pezeshkian, we don't know a whole lot about him. He's a heart surgeon. He's 69 years old, and he hates Israel. More on that in a minute. But that's about all we know about him. But he's seen as a more moderate face, and you just know Western diplomats are ready to roll out the red carpet for him as well, in addition to their compadres in the mainstream media. But when Iran's putting a more moderate face forward, it's clearly to run interference, meaning as Pezeshkian is smiling and grinning and shaking the hands of Western diplomats, maybe those naive Western diplomats and their mainstream media chums are saying, wow, gee, look, the Iranian regime has moderated. Hey, they're pretty reasonable. They wouldn't want to develop nuclear weapons. They don't want the bomb. Just look at Masoud Pezeshkian. He's a nice guy. And Iran knows this. And this plays into the regime's hands. So while Pezeshkian is smiling and grinning at the UN General Assembly and elsewhere in Brussels, the centrifuges are spinning in Iran's nuclear program. Folks, they're nothing if not crafty. Look, the game of chess was invented in ancient Persia, which is modern-day Iran. They're the craftiest, dirtiest players in the game. They know what they're doing. Every move is calculated, and no one ascends to the presidency of Iran, again, without the blessing of the very radical, very fire-breathing, very apocalyptic Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Here we go. The one place where these Iranian presidents will drop their guard would be talking about Israel. There's no semblance or charade or facade of moderation when it comes to talking about Israel among these people. Nonetheless, here it is from the UK Telegraph. First sentence, Iran's new moderate president told Hezbollah's leader, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, that he will continue to support the terror group and other regional, quote, resistance movements against Israel. Now, how do you write that? Who's the author of this piece? Akhtar McCoy? How do you write that? How do you write that in the same sentence you call this man a moderate, in the very same sentence that you say he pledges to support Hezbollah and other terror groups against Israel? If that's the case, then he can't be moderate. Moderate relative to the butcher of Tehran, his predecessor? Here we go. In a letter to Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader, Masoud Pezeshkian, the new Iranian president, said, quote, the Islamic Republic of Iran has consistently supported the resistance of the regional people against the illegitimate Zionist regime. That's Israel. He emphasized that the support is, quote, deeply rooted in the fundamental policies of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the ideals of Imam Khomeini, and the guidance of the Supreme Leader. It marks Mr. Pezeshkian's first public statement on foreign policy since his election on Saturday. The letter suggests, newsflash, the letter suggests that Iran's approach to regional politics and its relationship with Israel is unlikely to shift under the new presidential administration. despite Mr. Pezeshkian's moderate stance. Okay. Again, in the same sentence, you're saying, wow, Iran's approach to regional politics, which is terror and radicalism and chaos, is unlikely to shift, even though Pezeshkian is moderate. And folks, I haven't read one thing about Masoud Pezeshkian which suggests that he is remotely moderate. Again, moderate in comparison to Ibrahim Raisi, perhaps, but radical in comparison to 99.9% of the rest of the world. I love just the mainstream media runs with this, contradicting himself in the same sentence. He's moderate. Oh, he supports Hezbollah, a vicious terrorist army which is committed to the destruction of Israel and America. You can't be moderate and hold those views. It also tells you that if the shift isn't going to, if there won't be a shift in regional policies on the part of the Iranian regime, now that Pezeshkian is the president, that also tells you that, again, the supreme leader calls the shots, and he ain't shifting. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is all jihad all the time. Pezeshkian goes on to say, I am confident that the resistance movements, aka Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Islamic Jihad, the Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, terrorists, not resistance movements. They will not allow this Zionist regime to perpetuate its warmongering and criminal policies against the oppressed people of Palestine and other nations in the region. Wow. I'm sorry, did you hear anything moderate in there? Is there anything moderate that I just uttered? It wasn't from my mouth. I'm quoting someone else. How did he gain this moderate and reformist, quote unquote, moniker from the mainstream media? And again, I'm sure Biden administration officials, European diplomats will be all in. Hey, Masoud, we can deal with him. We can talk to him. Because, folks, remember, if you're sitting in a Western capital right now, by and large, whether it's the UK, France, Germany, Washington, D.C., you want nothing more than just to give the Iranian regime what it wants, appease them, give them billions of dollars in sanctions relief, lift sanctions against them, and say to them, please, don't hurt us. We will give you anything you want. Whatever you want, we'll give it to you. Just please don't hurt us. And if the spirit moves you, could you maybe not develop nuclear weapons? Please, pretty please. We'll give you billions of dollars and debase ourselves in the eyes of the world and grovel at your feet. Because in our heart of hearts, we know that you're not going to stop your nuclear program. We know you have nefarious, wicked, evil, demonic intentions to develop nuclear weapons, destroy Israel, destroy the West, destroy, by the way, a good chunk of the Muslim world, so the Sunni Arab nations with the Shia superpower, the Shia axis, mostly Shia axis that Iran leads. We know you're evil to the core. And we really know that you're not going to stop long term. We really know that we're just kicking the can down the road for maybe a few years. We know all that, but nonetheless, it makes us feel better. And it creates the illusion, and maybe we can just convince ourselves that it's true, that you've moderated and that you are no longer a threat and that we don't have to worry about you anymore. Because if you're in the U.S., if you're the current U.S. administration, you're in Britain, France, you're much more focused, as this weekend's election results showed us, or the past week in the UK and France, and what we've seen from Joe Biden, his administration, you're much more focused on, quote, fundamentally transforming the nation you live in than you are worried about what's going on around the world. You're worried about what's going on, you're concerned with what's going on around the world when it fits into your great reset narrative. You're concerned, very concerned and enthusiastic about propping up left-wing movements around the world, left-wing radical socialist secular movements around the world. What you don't feel like dealing with and worrying about is China, Iran, North Korea, Russia. That's all a distraction. That terrorism, ISIS, that gathering storm that we've talked so much about here in the newscast, that's all a distraction from the greater goal and the main aim of, again, fundamentally transforming the West. But one last note of caution with the Iranian regime. We talked about the nuclear program. Folks, I got to mention this. And again, if you're just joining us, welcome, welcome. It's Monday, July 8th. We've got our channel here, nearly 1 million subscribers. We'd love for you to join us as watchmen and women on the wall. And folks, remember, look, Stakelbeck tonight, my brand new nightly, yes, nightly, national TV, international TV on TBN, the world's largest Christian television network, every Monday through Friday, every weeknight on TBN, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, every night, with a re-air every night at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Incredible content from a beautiful studio here in Dallas-Fort Worth, guests, footage, B-roll, all the pictures you could ever want. People are always asking for, but that we can't always do on a YouTube live stream. But you're here not for the bells and whistles. You're here for the content at the end of the day. I know that. But folks, the show is just a blast. We've interviewed President Trump. We've interviewed so many people. Hulk Hogan. You might say, Hulk Hogan? Yeah. We've interviewed some conservative folks in the entertainment industry, Kevin Sorbo, folks like that, President Trump, Israeli leaders. The list goes on. And you might say, wow, that's maybe not what we quite expected all the time. That's why we have a Stakelbeck Tonight channel here on YouTube as well. Check that out, folks. We've got 2 YouTube channels now. Stakelbeck Tonight, clips from our show every night at Stakelbeck Tonight. Check it out at Stakelbeck Tonight. Give us a subscribe over there as well. The Stakelbeck Tonight show, we're hitting all the issues I talk about right here, but a bit broader. So you'll see Israel, you'll see prophecy, Middle East over there as well at that channel, but a little bit broader too. We had Kevin Sorbo was on the channel last week, folks like that who are doing some interesting faith and family related things. So at Stakelbeck Tonight is our other YouTube channel. Check that out as well. But Iran's missile program, and check out the show every night. Again, TBN, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 p.m. Eastern time, every night, Monday through Friday. Reportedly, Iran is expanding its ballistic missile production. Wow, I'm shocked. According to Reuters, according to satellite images analyzed by Reuters, and hey, we're talking about the nuclear program and trying to shut that down. Well, it's a multifaceted threat, and Iran has the largest ballistic missile stockpile in the entire Middle East. And according to the Pentagon in the United States, Iran is working hard to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. So this report that they're expanding their ballistic missile sites is not surprising in that regard, because once you get the nuclear bomb, the nuclear warhead, you need to mount it on something in order to launch it at Israel or the United States or Europe or wherever. And ICBMs, which again, Iran is developing, folks, you develop them for one reason and one reason only, to mount them with a nuclear warhead. That's the only reason that ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, exist. They're designed to travel across continents, across oceans, tipped with a nuclear warhead. Reuters says that Iran is significantly expanding 2 ballistic missile facilities. 3 senior Iranian officials who spoke to Reuters confirmed that the country is expanding those facilities to increase its production of conventional ballistic missiles. The expansion would also allow a doubling of drone manufacturing, with drones and missile components to be sold to, drumroll please, Russia. Drones are to be provided to the Houthis as well in Yemen, and missiles are intended for delivery to Hezbollah. Very nice. In October 2022, Iran agreed to provide missiles to Russia for its war against Ukraine. Iran currently possesses an estimated arsenal of at least 3,000 ballistic missiles. And you thought I was kidding when I said the gathering storm, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea? Think again. So Iran, we already know the Iranian regime has become a massive exporter of drones and drone technology. We know it. Now it's missiles, ballistic missiles. So the West can whistle past the graveyard all at once and try to ignore this and try to ignore the Iranian regime's nefarious intentions, but it's going to creep up on you. Kind of reminds me of the mayor in Jaws. You ever see the first Jaws movie? All-time classic. And Richard Dreyfuss has a few choice words for the mayor, the shark. You basically saying, you won't acknowledge that we have a problem, that there's a great white shark in the water killing people and with the intent to kill people, unless it swims up and bites you. And it seems that Western leaders are determined to ignore the Iranian sharks in the water, the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people, the main victims of this wicked regime, but the Iranian regime. They're determined to look away and pretend it's not there and appease it and keep up this facade until it comes up and it bites. And when it's got the alliance and the friendship of China, Russia, and North Korea, not to mention Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Assad regime, the regime of Erdogan in Turkey, that's some pretty strong bite behind it. And the first Jaws movie is great. I'm sorry. What a great flick, right? Let's talk France and Britain real quick, folks, and the ramifications for the world and the United States. I think it's real simple. Now, let me break this down. Actually, it was the subject of our opening monologue today on the Stakelbeck Tonight show, which you can watch tonight on TBN, 7:30 Eastern, 10:30 Eastern. But here's a little bit of a breakdown for you. Let me just pull this up real quick. Okay, follow me here because it's a bit convoluted, the French political process. Let me preface this by saying on July 4th, Britain, the Labour Party, Keir Starmer becomes prime minister. He's looked at as more middle of the road, but he's surrounded by, left-leaning. I love how the media says left-leaning, but middle of the road, but surrounded by many radical leftists in the Labour Party, which has been rife with anti-Semitism over the past few years. They say Starmer's tried to root it out. We're about to find out. Let's see who he surrounds himself with in his cabinet. They want an overwhelming majority of the seats in the British Parliament. And just the British government in general. Labour now controls Britain. Why? Why did the so-called conservatives, the Tory party, get their tails kicked? Maybe because they governed and acted like liberals. They're practically indistinguishable from Labour in many ways. If you're supposed to be a conservative right-wing party, act as such. Instead, they were open borders, same weak nonsense. Hey, folks, Britain, I'll tell you, this alliance of radical Islamism, and look at the demographics in Europe. By the year 2050, what's it going to look like demographically? So what Great Britain has done, what France has done, is open up the floodgates to people who are flooding in from the Islamic world who do not share Western values, do not share the kind of values that Britain and France were built on. It's just a simple fact and a statement. They would admit that. They'd say, yeah, we're not doing that. We will follow Sharia law. Not all, but many would freely admit to you, yeah, we don't believe in French culture, British culture, and we want no part of it. So it's not, oh, how offensive for him to say that. They themselves will tell you that they detest the West, Britain, France. They're here to take advantage in many cases. In other cases, there's people who just outright want to conquer. And it's a slow roll, and it's a long game and a long process that they're playing, and they will strategically work with the radical left in order to make that happen. So Britain is one, and it's a mess, and it's been a mess for some time. Here's France. Now, this is why I want to read directly just to break this down, because some people are saying, who, what, who won? What about Macron? Okay, follow me here. There were 2 rounds of parliamentary elections in France. This is important, folks. That's the way they do it. There's 2 rounds. The first round, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the so-called far right, the far right, not just the right, the media calls them the far right. They won overwhelmingly, led by Marine Le Pen. They were overwhelmingly favored to win the second round of parliamentary elections. Instead, they finished 3rd place yesterday behind Emmanuel Macron and his centrist, left-leaning alliance. And the number 1 party, the New Popular Front, or NPF, they won the most seats yesterday. They won the parliamentary elections. Who is the New Popular Front? Well, it's a collection, as I said earlier, of communists, socialists, Greens, environmentalists, Marxists, radical leftists, and they now hold the most seats in France. Good luck. But they came together at the last minute in like the past week or two. 200 people dropped out, 200 candidates, so that this could all form. And Macron watched it, and their main goal here was to block the so-called far right at any cost. The far right. We must block anyone who's not in support of massive open borders and Islamic immigration, who supports Israel, who supports traditional Judeo-Christian civilization, Western values, or what's left of them, I should say. That must be stopped at all costs. So they all pooled their resources, this motley Marxist medley of parties in France, and they won the election. But the question now is, okay, the right, Macron's coalition, the radical left coalition, they all won a good amount of seats. No one has a majority. No one reached the threshold. I forget how many seats it is, but no one reached the threshold needed to govern. Now, the radical left, because they won the most seats, are saying, we should govern. Now, I don't know what happens to Macron in all this. If he ends up stepping down or he's just a lame duck, as the radical left ends up the strongest governing force. But Jean-Luc Mélenchon, he is probably the most visible and vocal voice in this New Popular Front radical left-wing coalition. He said, we're ready to govern. We want to govern. By the way, he's notorious for anti-Semitic statements. And his first statement yesterday upon winning was, the first thing we're going to do is recognize a Palestinian state. And if you looked at these victory celebrations, there were more Palestinian flags than French ones. And last night, for the better part of the night, the radical left was rioting and burning stuff and attacking police in France. And that's what they did when they won. Imagine if they lost. Folks, in closing, and we'll talk about this more during the week. I said earlier, a shadow falling upon the West. I believe that. Look, God's still on the throne, and he's in control. And no one said the last days were going to be easy. That's number one. We knew evil would be on the march in these Bible times, these prophetic times we're living in. So take heart, because God's on the throne. He's got you in the palm of his hand. But number two, in America, November, man, it already loomed large. Boy, does it loom large now. If you go radical left in Britain, France, and the United States, ramifications for the Western world, for the entire world, for Israel, no doubt. We're going to talk a whole lot more about this, folks, throughout the week. Much more to discuss. Keep it all in prayer. In an upside-down, dark world, as believers, we need to shine light in the darkness. And we'll do exactly that here on this channel. So thanks so much for joining us here today. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.